Now we're on this book. Very good info in this book. A lot of correlation to what we've been learning. And it's called When Scotland Was Jewish. DNA evidence, archaeology, analysis of migrations, and public and family records show 12th century Semitic roots. Elizabeth Caldwell Hirschman and Donald N. Yates. When Scotland Was Jewish. All right, towards the introduction, it says, so why are we proposing that many of Scotland's people were Jewish? For the simple reason that it's true. In the chapters that follow, we present evidence from several empirical sources: DNA, public records, anthropological observations, architecture, archaeological excavations, family and clan genealogical records, censuses, cemetery inscriptions, burgess and guild membership rolls, ethnographic reports, and synagogue membership rolls. These documents the seemingly incredible claim that Scotland was and remains a country populated largely by persons of Jewish descent. The evidence presented does not suggest some ancient Jewish visitation based on a lost tribe theory. All right, so they ain't talking about lost tribes here. In other words, that a Jewish tribe dispersed from Judea, Palestine in antiquity and somehow wandered its way to Scotland, morphing over time into a population of Gaelic warriors. No, so he's saying it's not that what he's talking about. What he's talking about is this. Our argument is grounded upon documented historical migrations, all right, document, real stuff, into Scotland from various European countries, primarily France. So Jews coming from France. Who was the Jews that were in France? Remember, most of these were Sephardic Jews. The Low Countries, Hungary, and Germany. All right, so Jews coming from these places too. These migrants, we propose, were persons of Jewish ethnicity whose descendants now comprise the majority of the present population of Scotland. Further, we also argue that the greater part of the estimated 4 million Scots and Scots-Irish who immigrated to the New World were drawn from this same ethnic ancestry. He's saying an estimated 4 million of these people, most likely Sephardic Jews, migrated to the New World, went to the Americas. All right, so very next paragraph, it says the Melungeons. All right, I know a lot of you've heard of this before, but we're getting into Melungeon history, territory. Once we started talking about Sephardic Jews, Huguenots, Black Europeans, indentured servants, runaways, mixing with Indians, that's Melungeons right there. All right. So we're gonna start getting into that. I know if I talked about this, the Melungeons, in some of my videos in the past, the South Carolina video, the Huguenot video. We know that Abraham Lincoln's mom was a Melungeon. All right. So it says here, our story begins with an ethnic group to which both authors belong. The Melungeons are a people who have been dwelling in the Appalachian Mountains of the southeastern United States for between 300 and 500 years. Their origins have been the subject of intense speculation for at least 3 centuries. Typically, they are described as having dark skin. All right, typically what? The Melungeons have what? Dark skin, black or dark brown straight hair, brown or blue eyes, and European features. All right, so they're dark skin with European brown and blue eyes and European features. All right. A popular culture book written by a self-identifying Melungeon renewed interest in investigation of the group's origins and stimulated an abundance of scholarly research. A detailed biogenetic study undertaken by the present author supported that Kennedy had earlier proposed. The Melungeons were, in large part a Sephardic, Jewish, and Moorish community that began as early as 1540 with the De Soto expedition to the southeastern United States. All right, who were these Melungeons in a large part? Again, all right, and this is something you can research, and you would keep running into this as you keep researching it. You'll see that this is true. This is what they were talking about being true, documented history. Sephardic Jewish, Sephardic. Got my videos on Sephardic Jews. Mainly, there was a consensus that these people are so-called black or very dark-skinned, swarthy. These Portuguese and Spanish Jews were very dark-skinned. All right, Sephardic Jewish. All right, people of color, and Moorish community. Moors, we already know, people of color, right? So the Melungeons were people of color. These Europeans that were coming in, the Melungeons part were actually Sephardic Jewish and Moorish mostly. All right, and again, 1540s. They're saying that people saying there's no records, all right, in the 1500s, right? Well, De Soto and all these people, they did kind of write down when they traveled and who they brought and what was going on. This stuff is kind of recorded, all right, when they were first coming and colonizing. You know, first-hand accounts as primary sources describing all this, the expeditions of De Soto, where he went. A lot of people have this history even on the Indian side, you know, when De Soto was arriving into their ancestors' land and all that. So this is recorded, you know. We do got to be careful with information, but again, 1500s. And so what are they saying? Like I've told people before, a lot of the people who were there were saying they were Africans that they were bringing to with these expeditions were actually Black Latinos, which was Sephardic Jewish or Moorish people. All right, they were calling Latino. All right, and a lot of these people did end up being left behind here, and these people did end up mixing with indigenous Americans. And the Melungeon people are a big part of that history. The composition of this community was augmented over the intervening centuries by incoming Sephardic Jews and Moors, who found refuge in such way stations as the Low Countries, Germany, France, Italy, Greece, and England after fleeing the Iberian Peninsula due to religious persecution. All right, Hirschman 2005, that's the source. Now, letting you know, like what we learned, right? It's not just Sephardic Jews, there's Moors too who ended up where? In Germany, France, Italy, and Greece. Who did these people become? All right, we're talking about Huguenots, Protestants, Presbyterians, you know, Quakers, or what they were calling them New Christians, right? New Christians from the Iberian Peninsula. Sephardic Jews and Moors, right? You see, this is a whole nother source telling you what we already learned in other sources, other videos. One of the factors delaying accurate ethnic identification of Melungeons was that several carried Scottish or Scots-Irish surnames such as Caldwell and Kennedy, and had immigrated to the American colonies from Scotland or Northern Ireland during the 1600s and 1700s. Since the conventional view was that there were extremely few Jews living in either Scotland or Ireland prior to the early 1800s, this seemed to be an anomaly. All right, so if you don't understand what he's saying, so basically what they tell us, the fake history is that no, there was no Jews there because they want us to picture like Jews like today, you know, over there in Israel, you know, or whatever. But, you know, oh yeah, there was no Jews there, but these people, of course, were crypto. Remember, these were crypto Jews. They were considered new Christians. They were hiding. They practiced in secret because they were being persecuted by the Catholic Empire. Right? And it wasn't about complexion at this time, right? So to find that there was actually Jewish, Sephardic Jews, and all these people in Scotland at this time is an anomaly, he's saying, if we go with mainstream history. Had their original surnames been altered or anglicized to help the Melungeons blend in with surrounding Scots, Irish, and English settlers? This was what many Melungeons, as well as Melungeon researchers, believed, all right? Even the Melungeon people. So they know their history, right? If they're saying, yeah, that's our ancestry, well, they must know who their ancestors are, right? We arrived at an alternative, though seemingly preposterous hypothesis. What if the Scots-Irish, Scottish and English surnames carried by Melungeons had not been altered? What if their ancestral surnames really were Caldwell and Kennedy and Fraser and Bruce and Campbell and Skene? What if these purportedly Scottish and Scots, Irish and English settlers were technically from those countries of origin? but were ethnically of Sephardic, Jewish, and Moorish ancestors. Who? Who? Let's get this again. Big one, man. All right? All right? All these people coming from these low countries, right? Germany, Hungary, Scotland, Ireland. You know, they had these names. Supposedly that people saying, oh, they've been altered and all that, but no. These are their original names. And they were technically from those countries in Europe. So now you think they were just German or Irish or Scottish, but ethnically, they were Sephardic, Jewish, and Moorish. All right. Elijah Huskin was a Scots-Irish Appalachian pioneer whose family is intertwined, multiplied with others of Melungeon background in eastern Kentucky. His Semitic features were a point of pride with Skene, according to children and grandchildren, and he fondly recounted memories of the family's Scottish homeland and clan. All right, you get what's going on. Sephardic, Jewish, and Moorish, these people, these Irish. All right, talk about Black Irish. All right, so yes, all these Irish were ethnically of Sephardic, Jewish, and Moorish ancestry. All right, let's not forget. It's more correlation. So when we're talking about, when I did my white servitude videos, when they're talking about they were bringing in all these white Scottish and Irish and all these servants, a lot of those again were ethnically Sephardic, Jewish, and Moors. They were people of color. Right. All right, continuing the book. It says here, major revision of Scots history. Most Americans, and certainly most Scots, probably believe they know a lot about the history of Scotland. But as the author of the recent book, In Bed with an Elephant, notes, the worst features of Anglicization were the exclusion of Scottish history and literature in the school syllabuses. In the absence of official versions written and approved by Scots, most of us draw our notions of Scottish history from motion pictures like Braveheart and Rob Roy. All right, Braveheart. We all know the Mel Gibson movie, you know, where he was a Pict. But the ancient Picts, the ancient Pict people were people of color, right? Tribal people. They have paint all over them, Picts. Never mind that the former may have been a wildly crude Hollywood distortion of the Wallace story, and the latter is based on the work of Sir Walter Scott, the romantic inventor of the historical novel, and largely discredited, promoter of the Great Highland Revival of the early 1800s. 7 famous Scotmen are pictured here. Presbyterian reformer John Knox, scholar George Buchanan, Marquis of Argyll Archibald Campbell, the Earl of Ancram Robert Kerr, poet Allan Ramsay, Earl of South Esk James Carnegie, and physician William Gordon. As cursory inspection will affirm, none of these prominent Scotsmen looks typically Scottish. In fact, they appear rather dark and Semitic. Yet here they are Scottish aristocrats. They, the Scottish royal stewards, were equally dark and Semitic in appearance. All right? The stewards were what? The stewards, remember King James, the steward is actually swart. Swart, meaning black, so-called dark. Steward, swart, were actually dark and Semitic in appearance. Of Charles II's dusky appearance, and his mother, Queen Henrietta Maria, had been half mortified, writing after her confinement that the child was so dark she was ashamed of him. All right? Who? Charles II. He was so dark she was ashamed of him. He was quickly dubbed the what? The Black Boy. He was quickly dubbed the Black Boy. Enemies made out that he was a black bastard, begotten by a black Scotsman. All right, you hear what's going on? We propose that many, perhaps most, present-day Scots are descended from the same types of ancestors who produced these personages. All right, so who came out of who? Right? Further, we suggest that their forebears were Mediterranean Jews from France, Spain, and Portugal. All right, Mediterranean Jews, people of color, Moors. All right, so the book actually breaks down some important famous people in Scotland's history and proves how they were, Sephardic, Moorish ancestry. All right, we're not going to get all this, but like it says, this was an age when Celtic culture was an eclipse, but it was a time that saw the mass expulsion of Jews and Moors from Spain due to the Spanish Inquisition. All right, so it's breaking down how they arrived there, these people's ancestors into Scotland. The Commodus, Richard Oran, for example. All right, so I was talking about him and how he was saying that he was a descendant of King David. But actually, but it says here, says, as we shall argue, this did not come about randomly, but resulted from the Scots royal family belief that they did in fact descend from the Jewish King David. We will argue that the family was Jewish patrilineal ancestry in faith, but of Western Sephardic rather than Semitic, all right, and Middle Eastern genetic descent. They were Sephardis, all right, not from the tribe of Israel specifically, all right, not from King David himself specifically, all right. So they start breaking down. Here's a whole genealogy family tree. So right here in this part, before we continue, is talking about this person became a very important trade and merchant, and how this town became a place of trade. It says here that in 1378, a master mason, John Lewin, was hired to refurbish the walls of Roxburgh Castle. Around 1400, a Parisian master mason, Jean Moore, was commissioned to enlarge Melrose Abbey. All right, this is in Scotland. It says these traits, patterns, capabilities, and names were most common to two ethnic groups at the time: Spanish Moors and Sephardic Jews. So all these people they were commissioning to come rebuild, refurbish, build, all these people they were calling, these were Sephardic Jews and Moors that had these traits and patterns and capabilities. Not only did Islamic mercantilism far surpassed that of Western Europe and Christendom, but Jews were well represented in all branches of European business and industry, with the possible exception of agriculture and foodstuff preparation. Jews and Muslims came to dominate such fields as banking, shipping, chemicals and pharmaceuticals, glass, silk and paper manufacture, book trade, jewelry, precious stones during this time period. Who was doing that? Jews and Muslims, people of color from Iberia, Portuguese Jews, and Muslim Moors. All right, they were in banking business. Remember, they were in the trade. We just got the video. They did the sugar trade. They started doing the ships, merchants all over the place. All right. Just continue. It says here, history of the Scottish people, 1560, 1830. It says most encyclopedic account of Scotland focuses primarily on the post-Reformation period. Of interest to us, however, is his discussion of the reasons leading to the overthrow of Catholicism by Protestantism. All right, so why were there a lot of Sephardic Jews and Huguenots and all these people of color there, Moors, and then Protestantism? Like I said, wherever you follow these people, you're going to follow Protestantism. Again, new Christians, that was just another way for them to hide their Jewish and Muslim faiths under the banner of Protestantism. Protest, look at the word right here, protest, all right? Protest, who were they protesting? Protestantism, protest. Foremost among these was the remarkable corruption of the Roman Church in Scotland. All right, now down here it says, throughout the 15th century, there have been great clerics like Bishop Wardlaw, who founded Scotland's first university at St. Andrews in 1410. All right, this guy founded Scotland's first university. Bishop Turnbull, who founded Glasgow University in 1451. And Bishop Elphinstone, who founded King's College, Aberdeen in 1496, and was the first patron of printing in Scotland. Printing. I already know what they're going to say. It says, as will be described shortly, these three churchmen were likely of Jewish ancestry, all right, Sephardic Jews, and governed parishes with largely crypto-Jewish populations. Crypto-Jews, secret Jews, none of Scotland's big three universities ever required students to take a religious oath, a factor that rendered them attractive to Jews from as far away as South Carolina. All right, going back over there, the kids, you see the connections now when they're saying that these people of color send their kids over to Scotland to learn in these universities. Non-Christians were excluded from studying at Oxford or Cambridge, and most English and American universities of the period mandated an oath on the New Testament naming Jesus Christ. Oh, wow. So that's very interesting right there. You know, just prove, you know, those big name universities from Scotland, they were open to any Jews. The other ones in England weren't. So that tells you, you know, where these people were going, who was really there running things. All right, so continuing again, we just belly flop into different parts of this book, but we're trying to go in order here. All right, now this is what it says. The Smout then notes that the Protestant Reformation, all right, Protestant Reformation was embraced readily by the merchants. Who's the merchants again? The Moors and the Sephardic Jews. The burgesses, this is the middle class, and educated members of Scottish society. They embraced Protestantism. Why? He attributes this to the emphasis of a new doctrine placed on a direct relationship to God. Meaning it's almost like the Jews and the Muslims that, you go directly to God. There's no person in between like Jesus or anybody else that you have to talk through. So he says he alludes also to the presence of a secret church among this segment of the population. But in between the Protestant Reformation, there's a secret church. They're really not Protestants. Among this, it says Protestant numbers snowballed. By 1559, there were already an alternative church existent in many parts of Scotland, awaiting some revolutionary stroke to bring it to power. Protestantism succeeded by taking the right strategic bastions in society. It succeeded in the burghs, where traditions of secrecy and cooperation among members of craft guilds and merchant guilds, confederation, Huguenot. A confederation, what does Huguenot mean? A confederation between comrades, an oath. So again, it existed, right, in these Protestant circles. There was traditions of secrecy and cooperation among members of craft guilds and merchant guilds. They were connecting, they were setting up shop, connecting the network, getting the network built all around the world, the business, the trade, and of cooperation between the burgesses of different towns acting in their common interests, made towns the ideal environment to sustain secret and secular church organizations. What Smout overlooks, as do virtually all other observers, is that the crypto-Jewish society we propose was present in Scotland since 1100, had been strengthened enormously during the previous 5 decades by the arrival of thousands of converso Jews fleeing the Spanish Inquisition. All right, these are Sephardic people of color, all right, people of color, so-called black people. As we will argue in chapter 10, crypto-Jewish practice was now poised to transform itself into Protestantism. Again, I hadn't had a direct link to that, but I was letting you know that you got to put it all together. What are these Protestants? And it makes sense now with all the Huguenots or all these Moors going into, we read in that book, previous videos, that the Moors, we weren't even talking about Sephardic. It says the Moors were expelled and they ended up in southern France and became known as Huguenots. Huguenots were Protestants, right? So again, it says here, as we will argue in chapter 10, crypto-Jewish practice was now poised to transform itself into Protestantism, all right? It was perfect for them to hide under Protestantism. Smout describes the robustness of the burgh-based Scots economy in the post-Reformation period, with each burgh acting as a self-governing unit, electing its own burgesses and monitoring apprenticeships for both merchants and craftsmen. Right, apprenticeships, indentured servitude. Scotland became an active international trade center. Again, the Jews brought prosperity and trade into all the places they went in. Remember Holland, in the Netherlands, Amsterdam. And in each burgh, a small set of families governed the town both politically and financially. From Aberdeen, Scotland traded as far eastward as Russia, Poland, and the Baltic, while from Glasgow and Edinburgh, she traded south and went west to England, France, Spain, the Americas, and the Caribbean. Primary export products were wool, hides, fish, paper, coal, salt, and linen. And in each of these industries, specific families came to dominate the trade. All right, there's a monopoly going on here, establishing itself. Remember, and again, who's in behind all this? Sephardic Jews and Moorish people, often forming oligopolistic partnerships with family members residing in ports such as Bordeaux, Rouen, Cadiz, Lisbon, Warsaw, Rotterdam, London, Barbados, Danzig, Stockholm, Bergen, the Canary Islands, and Riga. All over, right? All over the world, wherever they can go, they had a network, a trade, a port. Remember these port Jews, they were calling them port Jews in my previous video. Catch those videos. All right? Port Jews, these families, these merchants, Protestant international merchants, as they were calling them. Judaic scholars have often pointed to the phenomenon of court Jews, figures primarily located in Central Europe, serving kings and princes as bankers, tax collectors, and army provisioners. But it was not until 1980s and 90s that historians began to revisit the subject and focus attention on the Jews who settled on the Atlantic seaboard. The destination of Port Jews was born, as I just said, Port Jews, in cities ranging from Trieste to Glasgow, from Salonika to Hamburg. The social type of the previously overlooked Sephardim, overlooked what? Sephardim of Spain and Portugal, was thrown into high relief. They were overlooked. Of them, we learned, for instance, that they used the traditional autonomous Jewish community and enjoyed improved legal status, which permitted voluntary affiliation to the Jewish collectivity. They questioned Jewish religious tradition, having been estranged from it for so long, and displayed a form of ethnic Jewish identity, and the distinctive role of Sephardim as precursors of the Enlightenment, who experienced emancipation as a gradual development, has been, relatively speaking, ignored. All right, this has been what? Ignored, and that's why we're learning about it now. All right, opening the seals, telling the truth, correcting history. All right, the Scottish Burgess system in many ways combined the roles of court Jews and port Jews. All right, so now we're on this part of the book. Again, we're in the book When Scotland Was Jewish, and it says here we're going to talk about the stewards now. All right, I know a lot of you know the stewards. A lot of you already know these are people of color. We know King James was a black man. King James was a steward. And we know a lot of the stewards basically came known as Jacobites, followers of James, King James, right? So Stuart family, of course, that was their family. All right, but it says here, the forgotten monarchy of Scotland, Prince Michael Stuart, 2000, it says here. It says the author of this Scottish history is HRH, Prince Michael Stuart of Albany, head of the Scottish royal house of Stuart, a descendant of the Stuart pretenders. The word pretender did not originally have a pejorative meaning. These royals are de jure legal successors of the last Stuart monarch, Queen Anne, with whose death in 1714 the throne passes to the Hanoverians. An immediate giveaway to Prince Michael's storyline is his listing as an honorary president of the Association of Jewish Students of Glasgow University. Other titles of his include, for example, Titular Prince of France and Poland, and Duke of Normandy and Aquitaine. So this person has all these titles, right? Is the Stuart. Why is the current heir of the Stuart dynasty of Scotland also head of the Glasgow University Jewish Student Association? Good question. Because he is of Jewish ancestry. All right. Oh, so he's Jewish. Let's see what type of Jew he is. HRH Michael Stuart puts the circumstances in a rather straightforward manner. In his narrative, the Stuart family, maternal line in France, was descended from the tribe of Judah. He believes his family is of Davidic ancestry, that is, from the Jewish King David, and he is therefore a Jew by descent. The Stuarts were among the seed of French families that came to England with William the Conqueror and his Norman army in 1066. All right, so the Stuarts originally weren't from Scotland. All right, just so you guys get that clear. How did they get there? They were one of the original settler French families. French, what type of French? Who are these French? French families that came to England with William the Conqueror and the Normans that invaded England in 1066. We know about the Norman invasion. Originally named Fitz-Alan. That was the original name for the Stuarts, Fitz-Alan. The family took the name Stuart after serving as royal stewards to the Bruce dynasty of Scotland. All right, Stuart, a title, a position, by marrying the female heir of King Robert Bruce in 1315, Walter Stuart, who by this time served also as a regent, ensured that his son Robert II eventually advanced to the throne of Scotland. HRH Michael Stuart. It should also be noted, thus give credence to the Stone of Destiny origin story. All right, you guys know about the Stone of Destiny, Stone of Jacob, which they carry, they still use and sit in their throne. They put it under the throne. You guys haven't researched that. We're going to do a video about that eventually. That's why we're doing these videos right now. This information in Scotland and Ireland is just skimming the surface for what they got coming. All right, who these people are, the ancestry, are truer, more historical, more factual story of the genealogy, of a lot of these nations, especially in these areas of Ireland and Scotland. I believe is a deep history, that we should know. And again, it says that the Stone of Destiny, he gives credit, this Michael Stewart, believing that the Egyptian princess named Scotia did come to Ireland, and that the Picts and Gaels both originated near the Black Sea, Scythia, and southern Europe. As he states, from Tamar and Ikkad were descendants most of the royal lines of Ireland. All right? If you guys don't know Tamar, actually Tamar, one of the wives of Judah. Tamar was one of the wives of Judah. They had kids. They did end up in Ireland and Scotland. That's what we're watching right now. All right. So again, this Stewart is letting you know that's what his family oral history is. All right. This is Princess Kosha, right? Because Tamar's Egyptian. Judah and Tamar had a kid, had children. All right. Remember, a lot of the times the Hebrew men were killed in battle. A lot of times it was just women remaining. A lot of the Egyptian princesses, as they're saying here, yeah, so-called, a lot of these is what we're talking about. That's the matriarchal. That's where the matriarchal can be proven to exist at least at some point. At this point, yeah, there was matriarchal, and a lot of that is in the if you read the Bible, it's in there. I would say how with Joshua, a lot of the men were killed. It was just women left behind, and Joshua did something with the women. And it seems like they ended up in Ireland and Scotland. Right, we're going off topic here, but it's in topic at the same time. Again, we just correlated with Michael Stewart. This is his oral history, so through which all kings of Scots trace their succession from the biblical kings of Judah. All right, so this is how they trace it in that Stone of Destiny. They've been carrying the stone of Jacob right there. While H.R.M. Michael Stewart may believe this explanation for the ancient Jewish lineage of the Scottish kings, we do not. He could be wrong. He could be correct, but the story is too far-fetched to support serious historical argument. Further, we do not require these remote origins, for France in 1050 is a more proximate and probable source for Judaic ancestry. All right, continuing further down, he's still quoting Michael Stewart. It says, Stewart provides us with a different perspective on the arrival of the outsiders into Scotland during the 1100s, noting that many of these immigrants were Flemish. I now remember the Port Jews in the Caribbean and Brazil and Curacao, French Guiana, and South Carolina. They were doing business with their Jewish family who were Flemish-ish. Right, Flemish, right, and again here, a lot of these immigrants that came in the 1100s in Scotland were Flemish rather than French per se. Although some Normans ventured into Scotland at the time of Malcolm III, there was no effective penetration until the reign of King David I. Right, that was a real person. 1122-53. The resultant settlement was far more Flemish than Norman, even though some of the noble families of Flanders. All right, so King David I during the same time as Prester John? Really? All right. Get the Prester John drop for King Drop, Con Drop, 42 The Drop Radio. All right. Again, a lot of these were Flemish and Norman. A lot of these early Scots were Flemish, even though some of the noble families of Flanders. So Stewart argues that the Flemish newcomers were attracted to King David because of their skill in administration, right? Business, international trade and business, all right? Here goes a Sephardic and Moorish element. They were also good farmers and weavers. Once the Flemish and Normans arrived, King David established them in a series of sheriffdoms and incorporated them into the Scottish judicial system. The wife of Scottish King David was Maud de Lens of Boulogne, all right? Boulogne, Flanders, the widow of Simon de Senlis, bearing a Jewish given name, and the wealthiest woman in Britain. Stewart states Maud was not only a cousin of the Count of Flanders, she was also a cousin of Godefroy de Bouillon, guardian of the newly created kingdom of Jerusalem. That was her cousin, all right? King David's wife was cousin to the guy who was basically the guardian of the new kingdom of Jerusalem. David's policy had been to implement a mercantile strategy that will link Scotland to a trading empire centered upon Bruges and managed by Flemish families throughout the eastern and western Christendom. Accompanying Maud to Scotland was a host of Bologna kingsmen: Walter Fleming, now Seaton; Gilbert de Ghent, now Lindsay; Robert de Comines, now Cummin; and Buchan; Arnulf de Heston, now Graham; the Advocate of Bethune, now Beaton. Stewart was also states that Flemish ancestry characterized the Scottish families of Aberdeen, Estruner, Baird, Balliol, Boswell, Brodie, Cameron, Campbell, Crawford, Douglas, Erskine, Fleming, Fraser, Hamilton, there you go, Hamilton, Haylines, Leaf, Leslie, Murray, Oliphant. All right. Thus, many of the surnames we think of as typically Scottish are in fact Flemish. All right, so we're gonna dig into Flemish and French. So a lot of these are actually French. And you know, when I'm doing people's genealogy, and we get far back, and when they want me to go further back to see, you know, who these ancestors were in Europe, knowing that these are people of color, and so we go back. Well, they'll, you know, eventually start out in Scotland or Ireland or England, and then eventually a lot of them will end up in France, just like they're saying here. And as I keep going, I show them, like, look, man, you know, it came from France originally, and then it seems like the name of even can go even more further. You end up in Spain and Portugal. All right, Sephardic Jews, Iberian Moors. All right, so many of these names, again, Scottish, are actually Flemish and French. As for the people carrying them, in chapters 3 and 4, we will document the intermarriage and consanguinity among the Norman nobles, both in Scotland and families related to them in France and Flanders. The cohesiveness of these bonds of kingship provided a unified political and economic network that spanned Western Europe and the Holy Land. The royal house of Bruce came to an end in 1371 when Robert's son David, age 47, died after a sudden illness in Edinburgh Castle without a male heir. Robert the Bruce's daughter, Marjorie, however, had married Walter VI, High Steward of Scotland. She died giving birth to a son, Robert II, who served as a regent during David's frequent absences and was crowned into Scone Abbey on March 26, 1371. Initially the royal Stuart dynasty, Stuart describes his installation procedure, which was that of a priest-king, modeled after those of Israel. A priest-king, that's a Khan. Khan, Khan, like American, a priest king, a Khan, modeled after those of Israel. Firstly, the king-to-be was passed through a ritual of purification to become an ordained people's priest. He would then appear at the church abbey of Scone, dressed in white as a symbol of integrity. With his hands upon the stone of destiny, the king would swear his oath of fealty as the people's champion. He was duly anointed and then sat upon the separate and much larger coronation stone. In the early days, the crown was no more than a circle of gold, and its symbolic concept was to catch the eye of God. At that stage would that religious ceremony begin. Led by the bishop and the 7 priests, there were readings from Old Testament scriptures along with prayers. Continuing the book, when Scotland was Jewish, chapter 2. This is DNA and population studies, but why do you think they were Jewish? All right, so I just want to go down to this part because it's very important what it says here. It says, the mitochondrial DNA sequences of Jewish females are even more diverse than Y chromosomes of males, suggesting that non-Jewish women converted or married into the faith even more often than men. Importantly for our purposes, descendants of medieval Spanish, French, and Italian Jews, all right? Spanish, French, so French, remember French were invading Scotland, French Jews, that is the Western Mediterranean Jews of Sephardic, all right, Sephardic, are not primarily Semitic ancestry, all right? Again, are not primarily of Semitic ancestry, meaning their, you know, their whole ancestry is not just primarily, meaning they're like straight out of King David, right? Remember in my Sephardic video I did, Nations of the World. If you haven't seen it, go check that out. But it's not primarily. It's what they're letting you know here. It might. He didn't say at all. He said it's not primarily. So you do have a little bit, right? So again, Sephardi Jews, which are people of color, rather most belong to what is called the R1b Y chromosome DNA haplogroup. the most common paternal lineage in Europe and its countries of the New World founded by Europeans. What about simply regarding as Jewish any person who not publicly self-identifies as such? While seemingly reasonable, this solution will not work in the case of crypto Jews or secret Jews. Though a term normally is reserved for Jewish Iberian exiles after the pogroms of 1391, especially after the Edict of Expulsion in 1492, it can also be applied to ancestrally Jewish Scots, secret Jews, cryptos, ancestral Jewish Germans, all these Germans coming in. Remember that, because we're going to get into these people's ancestry that are famous in the U.S., people of color. Again, I got a video coming. All right, I'm going to show some of these people have German ancestry, and I know these German, to me, I knew a lot of them had to be people of color, and just knowing that a lot of these Germans were, in fact, Sephardic Jews and Moors that were coming into the Americas, it just proves it even more. And then it says ancestrally Jewish Melungeons, all right, Melungeons, and in fact, to any ancestrally Jewish person who forebears feared identification or detection, choose to hide their true identity and practice that religion in secret. For up to 600 years, crypto Jews had to survive without rabbis, yeshivas, Torahs, or synagogues, isolated from openly Jewish communities in Eastern Europe, Islam, and the Mediterranean, Islam too, and subject to a kind of double hostility from their surrounding societies. The religious status of these Marranos, all right, of who? Of these Marranos, who? Germans, Melungeons, Scots, Marranos, Conversos, Anusum, the forced ones, and new Christians. All right, again, there we go. New Christians. All right, they hide under the Protestantism, Presbyterian, Quakers, all that. Challenge some of the best rabbinical minds of the day. And so, to determine if the Scottish families in question were of Jewish descent, we use a process of inductive reasoning. We relied on clues from several different types of evidence: historical, genealogical, all right, linguistic, archaeological, geographic, and genetic. I mean, those are pretty important right there. By considering these different sources, we can argue that a given family had a very high probability of being Jewish upon their arrival in Scotland. It says, in some cases, this is no problem. Certain of these families are Jewish and can document lineal descent from Scots forebears. But in most cases, we're going to have to finesse this conclusion by looking at the overall pattern of evidence for that family, including the associated lines and marriage preferences. The form and marriage preferences, again, Louisiana, South Carolina, they were doing this, staying in the family circles. The formal term for this branch of science is the statistical inference of demography from DNA sequence data. We continue in the book when Scotland was Jewish. This is chapter 3. Just want to show you again brief parts of this book. It says genealogies of the first wave of Jewish families, 1100 to 1350. The previous chapter on DNA that we were just talking about basically went through they did tests on a lot of these people's descendants with the names like Kennedy, Cohen, Bruce, Stewart and all that. And they were coming up Sephardic region, Iberian, Mediterranean and all that. They were correlated with people in France, Germany, all over the world, Brazil, Canary Islands. Now, this is the genealogy, and this is just an example. Here, it says here the Bruce surname. The Bruce family of Flanders and Normandy entered England in 1050, so they're Flanders, Flemish, right? Norman people. As part of the entourage of Duke Richard I, the family remained in Britain, subsequently to the conquest of England by Richard's son William the Conqueror in 1066. Now, down here it says our research questions whether the Bruce family in England and later Scotland were practicing Jews as well. As their genealogy shows, several Hebrew Mediterranean given names are found among the early Bruces. Among these are Adam, Emma, Isabel, Agnes, Agatha, Euphania, David, Matilda, and Eleanor. All right, now in the last paragraph for the Bruces, remember it says that this lineage, together with the DNA evidence of Southern French or Spanish Jew, is origin for the Bruces. All right, Spanish Jew, remember, very dark-skinned people. The origin of the Bruces strongly suggests that this family was aware of its Judaic heritage and chose marital partners and given names designed to perpetuate this heritage. When Bruces from Scotland arrived in the American colonies during the 1600s and 1700s, the marital patterns of at least some members suggest that the crypto-Judaic practice had been carried forward to the New World, crypto secretly. All right, now it's showing Forbes. All right, yeah, Forbes. All right, that's a Sephardic surname from Farabas, like the surname Forbush, Fabush, and Fabus all appear to be alternate spellings of Forbes. We believe that the family name originally was derived from the Moroccan Sephardic surname Farabas. Moroccan, all right? Pay close attention, all right? I'm not making this up. I'm not trying to make anybody, this ain't a lie. This is true history. Forbes, right? Forbes magazine, right? Forbes. We believe that the family name originally was derived from the Moroccan Sephardic people of color surname Farabas, which is related to Phoebus. Several colonial members of the Forbes family living in Charleston, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia, were openly Jewish, belonging to the Spanish-Portuguese synagogues there and being buried in Sephardic cemeteries. Given below is an informative Gen 4's forum posting from a Forbes Farabas descendant. All right, and it breaks it down right here again. Go ahead and get the book if you want to read the whole thing. All right, so the book gives several examples. This is Fraser. It says they include several Sephardic Jewish surnames, their families. All right, the bridge says Fritzl, Fru, Oliver, Simon, Simpson. All right, Simpson, yes. All right, and then it goes into Leslie. All right, and it breaks down to Leslie families. Says, as in the case with our other families, Scottish originating Leslie's exhibited Judaic naming practice in the American colonies, and members of the Scottish-based family group openly practiced Judaism in Charleston, South Carolina. So you see what was going in Charleston, South Carolina. If you missed my South Carolina video, people of color, Charleston, South Carolina was majority people of color city, not a white city. These were rich, wealthy, free people of color. A lot of these, now we know. We're reading, we're correlating everything. Like a lot of these were Sephardic Moors, Sephardic Jews, and they were able to practice finally after being persecuted a lot through Europe and having to hide, becoming crypto Jews and Protestants or new Christians. They were openly practicing Judaism when they got to Georgia and South Carolina. All right, where males were also leading figures in the Freemasons temple. A lot of the Leslies became Freemasons. Charleston was the port of entry for what was called Scottish Rite Masonry, and Savannah's chapter was established as Solomon's Lodge #1. All right, you heard what that's saying? That's where Scottish Rite Masonry entered the country through South Carolina. Again, a city of free people of color. Then it talks about the Douglas. We know about the Douglas and the Dubs, meaning so-called dark-skinned Dak. This noble Scots family first appeared in Britain around 1300 and settled on the Scottish border. One standard reference book observes that the Douglases were one of Scotland's most powerful families, and it is therefore remarkable that their origins remain obscure. We have seen in Chapter 2 that the Douglases have many branches, but all seem to agree in being originally Gothic, with a majority of DNA matches turning up in the Iberian Peninsula, where the Portuguese and Spanish are. The name Douglas means dark stranger. Remember, we got this on my Swarty Euro videos. The Douglas family were basically people of color, so-called black people. Black, Douglas, dark stranger, and Gaelic. And many have originated from the Mediterranean complexions of the family's founders. The Black Douglases, so named for their dark coloring, were the dominant force on the borders between England and Scotland from 1300 to 1450. Who? The Black Douglases. Dominant force on the borders between England and Scotland. All right, that's history. I'm not making this up. Nobody's trying to culture vulture anybody. Family portraits attest to their ancestral Mediterranean physiognomy. Septs associated with the Douglas clan include Blackstone, Blallow, Brown, Drysdale, Forrest, Inglis, Kilgore, Kirkpatrick, Lockerbie, McGuffin, Morton, Sandilands, Soley, Symington, Troop, and Young. The following genealogy is based on the Black Douglases. All right, the Black Douglases. William of Douglas, he was what? A Black Douglas. Is the first of the Douglas name for which any certain record has been found. He is thought to have been born before 1174. William was surely related, probably mother-in-law of Freskin the Fleming. All right, Flemish, who came to Scotland before the end of the reign of David I. It is believed that both William of Douglas and Freskin the Fleming came with their families from Flanders. All right, Normans, perhaps connected with the House of Bologna, Jewish. Other than the possible connection with the Fleming, the wife of William the Douglas is unknown. He did, however, have one known son. All right, it keeps going. So that's the example of Douglas, a little bit of the history there. All right, it's another family, the Gordons, surname. All right, it says they have originated in France. most likely coming in with the Normans. It says a lot of their clans and septs include the surnames Jardine, Gardner, and Gardner, in addition to Gordon. Additional surnames associated with this clan are given below. Several of these are common to Sephardic and Ashkenazic Jews. Alright, so mixed. Alright, that's the Gordon. Again, Stewart. We already discussed the Stewart family in some detail in chapter 1. The clan Stewart website is the following. So it lists the Stewarts again. Among the septs allied with the Stewarts are several having Sephardic ties. These include Lombard, Lyle, Dunleavy, Lehi, Levite, Lay, Lee, Lou, Lewis, Rob, Mitchell, Glass, Jameson, and Jamieson. The left surnames derive from the Hebrew tribe of Levi. Rob from Reuben, Mitchell from Michal, Jameson from Chaim or Chaim, and Glass from glass production, a Sephardic skill. Lombard from Langobardi, the 6th century invaders of Italy. They were what? Sephardic Moors, was an early medieval name for money changers from Italy. Many, if not most of them, Jewish in England. Money changers, money lenders, money. Remember that the word, money, is how you weigh gold. That was the standard measure the value. In England, it became synonymous with banker. All right, they just became basically the bankers, so Sephardic Jews, Moors, and left its heritage in the name of the main street in the city of London, where the stock exchange took shape. All right, city of London, that's one of the city-states in the world. We got 3 city-states: the Vatican, City of London, and Washington, D.C., where the stock exchange took shape. All right, medieval Oxford Lombard Hall was named after the Jewish proprietor. All right, you're starting to see the bigger picture here. As we explored in Chapter 1, HRH, Prince Michael Stewart claims to be of Davidic Jewish descent. In Chapter 5, we will present documentation concerning Jewish communities dwelling in France prior to the arrival of the Normans to complete the picture of Scotch Jewish families. However, it is probably most appropriate to include in this chapter several Stewart connections, genealogies, which suggest a strong Jewish ancestry feeding into those Norman, Frankish, French, Hungarian, and Flemish families that made their way to England. They already were Jews in these families: Sephardic Jews, Moorish people, crypto Jews, and onward to Scotland during the 1050-1150 time period. All right, so it keeps going very deep on the Stuarts, and we continue in the book when Scotland was Jewish. Chapter 4, genealogies of the second wave of Jewish families, 1350 to 1700. It says here, the families discussed in this chapter are known to have arrived in Scotland after 1350. Most came from the Mediterranean and have been found to have Sephardic matching DNA, Sephardic Jews. Now, I was going to list a couple of family surnames. This is going to go in depth in them. We're going to just get a little bit of the info in all of them. It says here, it starts with the Caldwells. It says the Caldwells are believed to have arrived in southwestern Scotland from France, right? From France around 1550. Their somewhat jumbled origin story is given below. Despite some obvious inaccuracies, what is instructive about it is the report of long-term religious harassment by the Catholic Church in Spain and of the dark Mediterranean complexions of the Caldwells upon their arrival in Scotland. All right, their dark complexions. Because here, those of Protestant belief were being subjected to heavy persecution by the Roman Catholic Church. Eventually, because of these persecutions, they were forced over to the mountainous border that separates Italy from France and settled in a small village called Toulon, near the foot of Mount Aude, also called Mount Arid in some accounts. It was here that 3 brothers, John, Alexander, and Oliver, were born. Right? These 3 brothers are Caldwells. The 3 brothers were originally aligned with the Barbarossa brothers, generally considered pirates of much note at that time. The Barbarossas were of Algerian birth and became the dominant power of Algeria. All right, Algeria, right? Algeria, isn't that in North Africa? These were the pirates. The name Barbarossa is a European one meaning red beard, which the leader of these pirates, Khail ad-Din, by his Algerian name, who died in 1546, apparently had. All right, a North African Algerian with red beard. Nonetheless, these pirates were themselves defeated by the governor of Oran when he made a massive effort to end the dominance of the Barbarossas. John, Alexander, and Oliver escaped without being captured by the Iranian governor and returned to Toulon for a short time. The Caldwell brothers put their years of experience on the sea to good use and amassed a naval fleet of their own, one rivaling the defeated Barbarossas in force. Now, however, Spanish merchants hired John, Alexander, and Oliver to do away with the remaining pirates on the Mediterranean. Though hired by the Spanish King Francis I of France was so pleased with their success that he rewarded the brothers as well. They decided from the time forward to abandon the high seas and return to their home in mid-Odd France. But on their return there, they found France in a state of turmoil as a result of the persecutions suffered by the Huguenots and Piedmontese, as the Protestants in France were called. The Protestants in France. They, being Protestants themselves, sir, returned at once to Spain. So Gaul was a Protestant too, but they were really Mediterranean Jews, right? Hiding under Protestantism, just like the people in France. So this is an account, supposedly, a primary source that's from Spain. They took a merchant ship bound for the coast of Scotland. They landed at a place called Solway Firth, and finding the country Scotland in peace under the Protestant reign of King James IV, who then became King James I, King of England. All right? They determined to settle there after finding a large landholder. He being wealthy bishop of the place, they purchased from him a large estate. They then sent back to their native land for other relatives and friends, and in a few years became numerous and prosperous, talking about the Caldwells. But in order to acquire full title to this land, it was necessary for that they should gain the consent and signature of the king to their purchase. The king, upon signing their titles, imposed the following condition, that these three brothers should, when the king required it, each send his son with a troop of 20 men to aid the wars of the king. Our forefathers were of dark skin, all right, dark skin with deep penetrating eyes and high foreheads, although naturally of dark complexion, and mingling with the blue-eyed belles of Scotland. Though 13 generations, the younger generation have shown many instances of the fair hair and blue eyes of the mother's family. Thus the blue eyes and the black eyes appear in almost every family. So dark complexion people with blue eyes, all right, dark complexion people, dark skin with blue eyes. What is evidenced by this account, despite some obvious historical inaccuracies, is a basically credible story of a French Iberian family fleeing the Inquisition across Italy and France, becoming pirates during the mid-1500s, and then seeking safe haven with other Iberian refugees in southwest of Scotland. The story takes pains to portray the family's founders as Protestants, all right? So now they're Protestants, which is possible, yet unlikely, all right? Which is possible, but yet, you know what, unlikely, because they were actually Sephardic Jews and Moors. See what I'm saying? Telling you about the Huguenots is what I've been trying to explain to you. All right, Protestantism, banner, New Christians, banner, you know, crypto Jews, crypto Muslims, Marranos and Moriscos. Few Iberian Protestants served as pirates in the Mediterranean during the 1500s, while many Sephardic Jews and Moors did. All right, Sephardic Jews and Moors did what? Pirates. It also omits mention that at least one branch of the Caldwell line settled in Philadelphia prior to American Revolution opened a goldsmith and silversmith shop. These skills were usually passed from father to son through apprenticeships, right? William Ellison, all these people, the Costas, apprenticeships, remember that. And were almost exclusively controlled by Jews and Moors. Benjamin Franklin, Abraham Lincoln, apprenticeships. Further paternal DNA tests have matched the Caldwells with known Sephardic families, such as Rodriguez and Cooper. This fact, coupled with the prevalence of Caldwells in Melungeon settlements in the Appalachians, suggests that they were most probably of French Iberian Jewish, not French Iberian Protestant, origin. All right? Continuing, says, significantly, an edict of expulsion against the Jews of Provence was first issued in 1500. Jews in the Kingdom of Naples, which included a Duchy of Milan, this is all in Italy, were partially exiled in 1510. Wealthy Jews in Spanish-ruled Italy were expelled again in 1541. Beginning in 1555, Jews in Italy were ghettoized. All right, the Jews in Italy were ghettoized. Ghettoized. All right, so again, all these Sephardic and Jews and Moors being persecuted even in Italy. All right, after they have it to leave, you know, Spain and Portugal, and then up there, and then they had to leave from there or wherever they were from originally. a situation that was to last until Napoleon's invasion in 1796. The expulsion of 1550 and 1575 were to the interior of Italy. In 1572, the Duke of Savoy attempted to give Jews special permission to settle in Nice, but renounced the plan under pressure from Spain and the Pope. Philip II of Spain ordered the expulsion of Jews from Duchy of Milan again in 1597, and many took refuge in Protestant Switzerland. All right, so Jews taking refuge again in another Protestant country, right? Protestantism, and always very related to the Jews again. From these bare facts, it is obvious that Jews living in Toulouse had to keep moving to stay ahead of the change in jurisdiction and policies. Now it says here, Kennedy, all right, the Kennedy family, Canada. That's almost like Canada, right? Kennedy. The Kennedys first appear in Southwest Scottish history around 1360, shortly after an anti-Jewish pogrom in France. Right after something happened in France, then the Kennedys appear in Scotland. Their lands were named Cassilis, which may derive from the Sephardic name Cassel, and indeed Cassel is listed as one of the Kennedy septs. Other Kennedy sept names are Cassilis, Ulrich, Canadi, and Carrick, because Kennedys married into the Carrick family. DNA analysis have suggested that the Scottish Kennedys and their American descendants are likely of Sephardic ancestry, and that their original name may have been Candiani, from Candy. One of the primary Melungeon researchers in recent years is North and Brent Kennedy. Genealogies of the Kennedy family of Hyannisport, Massachusetts, do not go farther back than to Patrick Kennedy, a prosperous farmer of Dugganstown County, Wexford, Ireland, who was born in 1785 and whose son emigrated to America. However, there is no reason to rule out a possible French origin for the Massachusetts Kennedys before the family became Irish. Both Cassel and Canady appear on a list of refugee Huguenots to Ireland. So he just related Sephardic Jews to Huguenots, you see? Just like we've been showing you, and we already got the book saying Moors were Huguenots. Now we know Sephardic were also Huguenots, confirmed. Right? The Kennedys, they appear in a list. The Cassels, one of their septs, appear in a list of refugee Huguenots to Ireland. Refugee Huguenots, Sephardic Jews, people of color. Again, the Kennedys. It says here Alexander. Now Alexander, get the drop from 432 to drop radio. Can't drop. Been, drop this about the Rus, Alexandrus, the Ros, Alexandros. I get that drop. It says here Alexander. The Alexanders arrived in Scotland in late 1400s or early 1500s, concurrent with the Spanish and Portuguese Inquisitions. Further, both as given name and surname, Alexander is not indigenous to the British Isles. Rather, it is Greek in origin, and was one of the most widely used names among Mediterranean Jews in the Middle Ages. The Alexander family settled in the southwestern portion of Scotland, near Stirling on the English border, a locale with easy access to France and the ports of the Mediterranean. The lineage of the Alexander Earls of Stirling is instructive in showing a pattern of intermarriage with other DNA-confirmed Sephardic Scottish families. Example, Forbes and Douglas. Continuing further down, says, note that the Alexander family immigrated to Baltimore, Maryland, the arrival point for many immigrants of Sephardic origin due to Maryland's relatively lax religious constraints. The burial of Samuel Alexander occurred in Bethel Cemetery, likely a Judaic burial ground and not a Presbyterian or Anglican churchyard. Finally, Thomas Alexander, born in Donegal, Ireland, is recorded as having died 1749 in Virginia's Augusta County, believed to be a Melungeon crypto-Jewish community. Additional support for the Alexander Sephardic and crypto-Jewish status comes from the genealogical information on the family once they had reached the American colonies. Inquiries taken from the Alexander Genealogical Forum on the internet show a naming pattern for the children which is markedly Hebrew. There was frequent intermarriage with the Houston and Kennedy families, both believed to be Sephardic descent through DNA test. Alright, so it keeps going with the list of surnames. This is another one, the Cohen. All right. Other ways, McCowan, McCown. All right. And it talks about them. All right. Then we get into chapter 5. It says here, the early Jews of France. Again, we're in the book when Scotland was Jewish. The early Jews of France, 700 to 1200 C. Until recent appearance of the detailed study of Anglo-Norman Jewry, few people suspected that the Norman capital of Rouen served as a major center of Judaic culture during the High Middle Ages. All right, the Normans. So who's the Normans really? Gold Study in 1998 brought to life the extraordinary story of how Jacob Bar Jehuiel, a Jew of Rouen, defied Duke Richard, the grandfather of William the Conqueror, traveled to Rome, secured the protection of the Pope for French Jews, and in 1022, at the invitation of Baldwin, Count of Flanders, migrated with 30 other Rouen Jews to Arras. Ties to Lyon, Paris, Flanders, the Rhineland, and places as far away as Cairo, Jerusalem, and Babylon. The Jews of Normandy and Flanders had their own schools, cemeteries, properties, privileges, and even had head rabbi, an office transferred to England with the Norman conquest. All right. All see these Normans. So who was these Normans that were going into England? All right, we're in chapter 6 of this book, and it's here. It says, when crypto Jews entered England from Iberia at the time of the Inquisition, 1492, they were readily recognizable as Spaniards or Portuguese. Hence, pretending to be Anglican would not have been a credible cover. Thus, as Katz reports, these crypto Jewish arrivals pretended to be Roman Catholic, the state religion of Spain and Portugal. The Spanish Jews who had come to London undoubtedly continued as they had done at home, worshiping according to Roman Catholic rite and behaving outwardly in every respect like any Iberian merchant. By the 1530s, Katz writes, in the Jewish world at least, it was possible to speak of a secret Jewish community in London. Continuing further down, regarding Jews living in England, it says here, very interesting, it says, what we will find in Scotland is very similar. Crypto Jews in the merchant professions, all right? Merchants, crypto Jews, Sephardic, right? As leading doctors and apothecaries and as Protestant ministers. So crypto Jews, Protestant ministers. They're crypto Jews, but they're Protestant ministers, just like Huguenots. What is missing from this list are several craft skills which crypto Jews possess: silversmithing, leather tanning, tailoring, weaving, iron mining, smelting, and an orientation toward intellectual pursuits such as mathematics, chemistry, and astronomy. Continuing, it says the crypto Jewish community in England, which included several prominent physicians and businessmen, affiliated itself with Protestantism. All right, you see, Protestantism goes hand in hand with these people. That's how they hide it. For example, Katz writes that Santa Cruz testified in Madrid. He knows, as it is public and notorious in London, that by race they are all Jews, and it is notorious that in their own homes they live as such, observing their Jewish rites, but publicly they attend Lutheran churches and listen to the sermons and take the bread and wine. See that? In 1649, under Oliver Cromwell, whom incidentally Dutch Jews believed to have Jewish ancestry from the tribe of Judah, the Jews gained quasi-official entry to England. Though they were still not enabled to hold office, own land, or become citizens, it is very likely the continuation of these restrictions on Jewish social and economic mobility that encouraged the resident crypto Jews dating from 1294 to remain hidden. For why should they suddenly spring forth at that time and lose their lands, titles, and political and clerical offices? Perhaps they also felt that they could better assist their newly arrived co-religionists by remaining as they were and had been for centuries, secret Jews, public Christians. Secret Jews, public Christians. All right? Very important. I hope you guys starting to see the trend and see the bigger picture now. And, you know, I know, oh, who cares about the Huguenots and all this stuff, man? It's very important what's going on because it's bigger than just Huguenots or Huguenots, right? I know how to say it. I just prefer Huguenot. But either way, it's bigger than that. We see a deeper history. We see a lot of Muslims and Moors and Sephardic Jewish people, people of color, who eventually are the same people, secret Jews, public Christians. All right, we're still in the book when Scotland was Jewish. This is chapter 9. It says the Judaic colony at Aberdeen. And they say, we propose that Aberdeen's phenomenal growth as a trading center and financial capital was due to the fact that it was a crypto-Jewish burg. It is very likely that all the dominant families in the city from 1100 to 1800s That's a lot of years, were of Jewish descent, originating early from southern France, right? Also where the Huguenots and Moors went. Then from England after 1290 expulsion, and finally 1492 onward from the Iberian Peninsula and shifting safe havens of the Sephardic diaspora. The DNA results from prominent Aberdeen families discussed in Chapter 2 already support this proposition, but we will now develop a different line of evidence, one based on religious practices, marriage patterns, and burial customs. All right, so they keep going. They talk about St. Makar, and they talk about images of Jewish presence here. Talks about King's College Chapel. Talks about the royal images and coins. It says also suggestive of a Judaic or Kabbalistic orientation of portraits and coins of early Scottish royalty. For example, William the Lion, King of Scotland, 1165 to 1214, and David the First, the Saint, King of Scotland, 1124, 1153, are depicted on the character of Abroth in 1320 of the complete absence of Christian symbolism. Rather, two entwined snakes, a Kabbalistic symbol, surrounds the figures. King William and King David, his grandfather, all right? Two snakes, the dracons, serpents, Amadukans. King David, his grandfather, both have crossed legs in the form of the temporal Kabbalistic X mark. And William holds what appears to be a fruit, possibly a pomegranate from the Songs of Solomon. Pomegranate, where the promised land is. The pomegranate is the apple, where the promised land is. The Garden of Eden, paradise in America. All right? This build of the first temple, an oak tomb effigy in Gloucester Cathedral dated about 1250 Robert. All right, so they're doing all this correlation. It says the Stuart monarch said by the latest claimant Michael Stuart to be of Davidian descent used the principal symbols of the lion rampant and the St. Andrew's cross. We have argued that the latter represents the Judaic or Templar X mark used to commemorate ties with the Holy Land. The Scottish royal lion, we believe, is a direct representation of the Lion of Judah. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. As prophecies, if you're into scripture, that the line of Judah will always, have somebody on the throne. And there's always going to be somebody from Judah, whether they're good or bad or whatever they're doing, they're always going to be enthroned in some way. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. Widely adopted to indicate the divine right and supremacy of Davidic royal descent. For purposes of a comparison, let us now examine some markedly Sephardic iconography from roughly the same time period. They include 5 coats of arms for Sephardic Jewish families prior to the expulsion from Spain. Notably, the symbols used include the crescent, Tau symbol, lion rampant, tree of life, the Star of David, cockle shell, Jacobite icon, and 3-towered castle. Bishop's emblems and the Fraser coat of arms. All right, so it talks about that. Again, I ain't going to read everything, but it says here the Fraser family, which we have argued to be carrying Sephardic and Ashkenazi DNA, produced a bishop of St. Andrews, William Fraser, who served from 1279 to 1297. His 2 seals feature a bishop arranged with an arch with the telltale X mark in the center and flower edge on the side. All right, so they're breaking this down. Here's some of the symbols they're talking about. Edward Raham Salster, 1623, talks about him here. And this right here says opposite and above Sephardic Jewish coats of arms. All right, Sephardic Jewish coat of arms, you see? All right, continuing, says Aberdeen in the world. So they're saying we believe that it was the Judaic community that provided Aberdeen its large role as an international center of trade from the 1200s onwards. All right, so again, Jews providing prosperity when it comes to trade, merchant, business, connections that wrote in the networks they had worldwide, even from the 1200s, all right, before they were being expelled from Spain and Portugal. I told you that. So it was easy for them when they were being expelled to just go and let's just go do business where our families or, there's other people doing business like us, But as you can see, this was something that was going on. It says, as commerce went in those days, Aberdeen plied a busy trade in 15th century with both the Netherlands and the Baltic ports, Danzig and Poland particularly. The Danzig business developed sharply after 1500 when additional Sephardim would have arrived there from Iberia. And during the next 200 years, the number of Scotsmen trading in Poland was so large as to become proverbial. Several surveys put them at 40,000. All right, so these are Sephardics bringing all this over there. All right, we continue in the book when Scotland was Jewish. This is chapter 10 of this book, and it says the religions of Scotland. Did Presbyterianism have crypto-Jewish origins? Like I've been trying to say, right? And it begins, says, this book began with provocative idea. Scotland is or was Jewish. The previous chapters have explored the Jewish ancestry and culture of some of Scotland's leading families and much of her population. We now present an equally unlikely thesis, which we nonetheless believe is correct, that the origins of the Protestant Reformation, and especially the particular form it took in Scotland, Presbyterianism, all right? So Presbyterianism is a type of Protestantism. Same thing, all right? Also lie in Judaic influences, and they're letting you know this is crypto Jews doing this. Both authors of this investigation were not only told growing up that we were of Scottish origin, but we were also raised in the Protestant faith, just as we were subsequently discovered that our Scottish roots were not Celtic, but Sephardic and French Jewish. All right, no, not Celtic. These Scotland, these are Sephardis, French Jewish, French Jews, Huguenots. So also we led to question the traditional origins of Scottish Protestantism. A lot further on in this chapter, I skipped a lot. I just wanted to go ahead and read this part of the book because it correlates to what I've been saying, so people can understand why I mentioned the Huguenots with the Sephardic Jews in my past video. It says all of these social roles, their private religious beliefs, must have influenced their discourse, actions, and counsel. Lavender, 2003, who recently uncovered the Sephardic ancestry behind his family's French Huguenot roots in Charleston, South Carolina. So Sephardic ancestry behind French Huguenot, Sephardic ancestry behind his family's French Huguenot. Huguenots are Sephardic. Moors, people of color in Charleston, South Carolina, draws attention to the fact that the Huguenot seal of 1559 has the same four Kabbalistic Hebrew letters, the tetragrammaton, right, engraved upon it within a burning bush, no less, as we found in basalt on the title page of the Edward Ravon Psalter in Aberdeen in 1623. Many of the Huguenots were formerly Jews and Moors. Again, a whole different book. It's a whole different source, right? We're getting the same info that what? That many of the Huguenots were what? Formerly Jews and Moors. All right? Look at that and remember that. Put that in your mind. Many of the Huguenots were formerly Jews and Moors. And in France, the persecution of Jews and Huguenots went hand in hand. Again, what? In France, the persecution of Huguenots and Jews went hand in hand. Same thing going on with people like I told you guys in my last couple videos. They were being persecuted the same way. Everywhere they went, they were there, Protestant countries, all this. The history was all the same because it was all the same people. And that's what I was trying to show in my last videos. And this book put it all in one book. This research this person did in Scotland alone. She figured all this out. This her and the other person who wrote this. All right, correlating with all the information, all the research I've been doing and others in this community, and anybody else who has been studying this in the past, all the people before me. All right, this is what we're trying to show you, correcting history, try to show who these people are behind these tags, like Scottish, Irish, you know, there's the Huguenot, there's a story to tell behind all this. All right, so this is the next part of what I'm going to read in this book, still in chapter 10, continuing, but before I read this part, we're going to get into John Calvin, as you see here. John Calvin, or Calvin, or Calvin, 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 Kawan, Cohen. All right. So before we get into John Calvin, just very important, in case somebody doesn't know who he is, I'm going to read about who he is real quick. All right. So we're in the Encyclopedia Britannica website. And again, John Calvin, it says here French Jean Calvin, or Calvin, Jean Calvin. And this could be two U's. The V doesn't really get pronounced Calvin. Calvin, we're going to see what's the significance with that. Born July 10, 1509, Noyon, Picardy, France. Died March 27, 1564, Geneva, Switzerland. It says he was a theologian and ecclesiastical statesman. He was the leading French Protestant. The leading French Protestant reformer and the most important figure in the second generation of the Protestant Reformation. Basically the founder of Calvinism, or Calvinists, right? So the Huguenots, you know, very important, like I said, you know, crypto Jews, crypto Moors, basically Marranos and Moriscos, settled in southern France, came known as Huguenots. They were Calvinists, but even this Calvinist, we're about to see who he really was. So who really was all these Calvinist followers, these Huguenots, right? These French, so-called French Protestants, all right? This is just a banner, remember that. Now it's talking about John Calvin, or Calvin, 1509 and 1564. So who's this famous person? What's a Calvinist, right? What are the Huguenots? Calvinism, Calvinist, Protestant. Who started Protestantism? Who supposedly started the Huguenots? And what are their belief system? The Calvinism, right? Who is this John Calvin? It says here, John Jean Calvin was born in 1500 in Picardy, France. The family name was perhaps actually Calvin. John's father, Gerard, was employed as an attorney by the Lord of Nyon. Of John's youth, we know only that he served the noble family of de Montmort, and studied for the priesthood. In early adulthood, Calvin moved to Paris, where he became friends with two sons of the French king's physician, given their surname and their father's occupation. Nicholas and Michael Cobb were likely of crypto-Jewish descent. A little further down, it says at the time a war was in progress between Francis I and Charles V, so Calvin was forced to make his own way to Switzerland through Geneva. In Geneva, William Farel, bearing a Sephardic surname, Farel, founder of the Reformed Church in Geneva, convinced Calvin to stay and help preach the new Protestant theology. Calvin obliged and set up several Protestant religious schools in the city. So real quick, just wanted to bring you here now. I'm on Wikihan, I know Wikihan, but this is actually something you can actually research. So Cohen, it says here, right? Cohen. Don't know that's a Jewish name, usually given to the Levitical descendants of the Levi tribe, the Levitical priests of Aaron, the sons of Aaron, I guess, right? Cohen, surname. Now it says down here, French translation of Cohen gives Calvin, Calvin, as in John Calvin. John Calvin was a crypto-Jew, all right? He was a crypto-Jew, he was a Sephardi person of color. This Calvinist founder, the ones who the Huguenots follow, right? He was a crypto-Jew, right? Likewise, he has a crypto-Jewish last name. Calvin spelled before that Calvin, and before that Cohen. Really interesting stuff out there about it, all right? So that's just trying to get in reference. So just a little further on, I just want to get to this part. It says, from this capsule biography, we learned that Calvin's father was an attorney in Picardy, which contained at that time a flourishing Marrano colony. Marranos, crypto-Jews, Sephardic people of color. Obviously, his father was literate and well-educated. He was also an advisor to nobility. Common traits of crypto-Jews. Gerard Calvin was clearly ambitious for his son, guiding his career with an eye towards social and economic advancement. He was not a force of Catholic religious fervor or conventional piety. So you hear what they're letting you know here, right? Calvinism, and Calvin, the guy they, following, his dad was a Jew. Marrano colony, in a Marrano colony in Picardy, France. All right. We read also that John chose to learn both Greek and Hebrew, languages which would have permitted him to read the Old Testament, example Torah, in its original ancient form rather than relying upon Christians' translation into Latin. We perceive as well that he favored universal literacy and Judaic value, that two of his closest friends, Cobb and Farel, both had Sephardic surnames, and that he married a woman named Idel de Burr, evidently of possible Sephardic descent. A surviving sketch of John Calvin shows him with a leather head covering, full beard, and dark features. Dark features. All right, Calvin, John Calvin, dark features, dark. While we do not presume to judge his sincerity or Christian orientation of his beliefs, we do hold that he was of crypto-Jewish descent. All right, John Calvin, right? The Huguenots follow him, Protestantism, all that. He was what? A crypto-Jewish descent, that he moved in circles that included Marranos, and that his theology would naturally have been influenced by these ancestral community ties. All right, so again, John Calvin, Protestantism, Huguenots. All right, who are these Huguenots? Right, it's all coming together. I didn't think I was going to find a book that was actually going to let me know that I was right. John Calvin, all these people were Sephardic Jews, Moorish people, Marranos, Moriscos. All right, being persecuted, living under a new banner, new Christians, Protestantism, Presbyterian. We're going to see Quakers. We're going to see all this. All right. And just to correlate, again, I found another source here. It says here, The Curse of Canaan. It's the name of this book. It says A Demonology of History by Eustace Mullins. And don't worry, I'm not going to get too deep in this book. Just for some reason, it has some info that's going to correlate with what we're learning today. And it says here, let me just zoom in. Basically on page 56, on this part of the book, it says here, Calvinism, right? John Calvin, Calvinism, right? The crypto Jew. It says here, a strong influence in England during the 16th century, capitalized on the growing power of the mercantile fleet and the black nobility. Mercantile, merchants, right? Capitalized with the Sephardic Jews, right? And the black nobility. This ain't no Illuminati conspiracy. It's just there's a real history behind all this, whose main interest was money, right? Money. Unlike previous religious institutions, which had placed great emphasis on austerity and vows of poverty, this new religious doctrine stressed the charging of interest and loans, and the amassing of wealth was the new way of doing the work of the Lord. You hear that? So see how easy it was to just make it all about business, because there was a new way of doing the work of the Lord. The religious doctrine became charging interest and loans. That was the religious doctrine. That was the way of doing the work of the Lord, making money, all business. All right? It was a welcome revelation to the growing merchants class that God really wanted us to become wealthy. And riches vos became the new battle cry which swept across Europe as the Canaanites built great commercial empires. Canaanites, hey, I'm not the one saying it. The prophet of this new divine revelation was Jean Calvin of Noyons, France. He was educated at the Collège du Montagu, where Loyola, founder of the Jesuit sect, had studied. Calvin later moved to Paris, where he continued his studies with the humanists from 1531 to 32. During his stay in Paris, he was known as Calvin, and he then moved to Geneva, where he formulated the philosophy now known as Calvinism. At first known in Geneva as Cohen, he was known there as Cohen, all right? He was a Cohen, all right? He was a Cohen, the usual pronunciation of Calvin. He anglicized his name to John Calvin. This religious movement was based on literal Jewish interpretation of the Ten Commandments, Old Testament, philosophy, and the prohibition of graven images. The early disciples of Calvinism were known as Christian Hebraists or Hebrews. Christian Hebraists. The advent of Calvinism made possible the great expansion of Jews into further avenues of European commerce besides money lending. You hear that? Like we've been saying and learning. All right, this title, this banner they were using as New Christians or Protestants or Calvinists. Again, the advent of Calvinism made it possible the great expansion of Jews into further avenues of European commerce beside money lending. For this achievement, the encyclopedia honors Calvin with the statement, Calvin blessed the Jews. In this other book, it says here, The Death and Resurrection of the West, Foretold in Prophecy, Secrets and Biblical Symbols, Book 1 by Ralph T. Kenney. And Ralph T. Kenney says, a Jew from France named Jean Calvin, Cohen, changed his name to John Calvin and became a Protestant reformer in Geneva, Switzerland. Calvin initiated what I would call a totalitarian form of Christianity, which banned dancing, smoke, and every bit of alcohol in Sunday sports for the first time. He legitimized the lending of money of interest, which has now gotten every nation into unpayable debt. All right, so a Jew from France named Jean Calvin Cohen. That's who the Huguenots were following, a crypto Jew.